I can recall the day where I received my first video game console. It was around 2003 or 2004. It was Christmas, and my 11-year-old self was eagerly awaiting what presents I would get. And one of the first presents I unwrapped was a PlayStation 2. Naturally, I was excited, and I immediately plugged this bad boy in my TV. Right from the startup noise of the console, I was hooked. One of the first games I ever played was Sonic Heroes. Playing the game for myself was amazing. The graphics were colorful, the music was catchy, and the game was fun to play. The PS2 was the console that brought me into the world of video games. Flash forward to today, where I'm a lot more versed in terms of video games. I own a multitude of game consoles nowadays, and that includes my PS2. I have a handful of favorite video games as well, such as the Mario series, which has a unique charm about it. It is so simple in design, but the games are incredibly fun to play.
It's me, Mario!
But my favorite game series by far is the Sonic the Hedgehog series. I've played the likes of the original game for the Genesis thanks to the collection on the PS2, but Heroes got me into the series in general. It has so many great music tracks, great visuals, great characters, and an awesome sense of speed. So how would I describe my experience with video games? In fact, how can anyone? It's kind of hard to explain. It all has to do with the games people playing like, the consoles they own and why they chose to get them, and above all, the type of gamer they would describe themselves. But for now, I want to focus on the community here at Edinboro, so I went out and found some gamers who shared their experiences with me, how they became a gamer, what kind of gamer they are, and why they choose to stay gamers. This is a documentary about the journey to become the gamers that we are today. This is why we are gamers. For kids, nothing was better than getting what you wanted for your birthday or Christmas, especially if it was the newest game system. Every gamer has their humble beginnings, whether they played a game console over at a friend's house or relative's house and asked their parents for it, or they experienced it for the very first time. It was their portal, their first endeavor into the world of video games. Take, for example, a good friend of mine, Will, who shared his first video game experience with me.
My first video game console was the Super Nintendo, the most amazing video game machine ever. So simple, yet so refined. There was a reason to keep going because it wouldn't let you go back. I got it when I was probably 3 or 4, maybe even 5. I don't exactly remember. It definitely left an impact. The first games that I played, I think the very first game I ever played was Pac-Man. Amazing game because Pac-Man always lost, no matter what. It taught me how to lose gracefully. And then I moved on past that into platformers, Mario and Mega Man, games like that.
Another good friend of mine, Kyle, also talked about his background with video games.
My first console my family had was the Sega Genesis, and that was back in probably a couple years before I was born, back in '93. My own first console was the Nintendo 64. I got that when I was 6, I believe. Some of the first games I ever played was Sonic, Street Fighter for the Sega Genesis. And then for the N64, I had a lot of games. I had Glover, Super Mario, Banjo-Kazooie, Bomberman, all those fun games.
So both of them, like a lot of other gamers, had different experiences in terms of how they entered the gaming world. The same also goes for their fondest memories they have of playing video games.
I think probably the first time I played a multiplayer game, because I sat there with my cousin and I thought, this changes everything. Now it's all online and you can play with somebody without them being in the same room. It's insanity. I think multiplayer games it gives you a sense of community. Regardless of what game you're playing, you feel like you belong to a certain group.
However, the main point that they shared is that neither of them would be the gamer they are today without these games.
The Sega introduced me into video games, and then the Nintendo 64 introduced me into, Nintendo and all that fun stuff. I'm not sure if I would be the gamer I am today if it weren't for those.
I don't know if I would still be a gamer now or even be into video games without those games, because without those games I don't think I would have been introduced to it without having some sense of what gaming was.
Alright, so as kids, we're now beginning our video game journeys. But as time goes on, we start to add to our collection of video games. As kids or as teenagers, playing a game for the first time is an experience. An experience which tells us what we like in our games and what we don't. We start to feel a passion for gaming. We begin to make close friends because of gaming. And of course, we begin to form our favorite video game consoles and of course, our favorite games. Speaking of the latter, another friend of mine, Aaron, discussed his favorite video game console.
For me, I'd have to say my favorite game console is either the Nintendo GameCube or the computer. I recently got into PC gaming, and it's just been easier because, you don't have to bring an entire console, hook it up to a TV. Like, all your stuff is just right there with, like, the rest of your, main stuff that you would do, like schoolwork or whatever. GameCube, oh man, I remember back when I was a kid, that was, I think, the third console I've ever owned, next to the Super Nintendo and the N64. And I just remember so many good games being on GameCube. Melee, Super Smash Bros. Melee, Pikmin, Luigi's Mansion. Oh god, I used to play that thing all the time. I didn't even have that many games on it. It was just a lot of fun.
Luke, also a good friend of mine, had a similar answer to his favorite game console.
My favorite video game console, I would say, is the GameCube, because it was right in my childhood where I was like, it was around middle school time where I was very open to the ideas of like games and stuff like that, and where I was like grabbing as much information as I could in my life, and that was there for me. It was just something completely new compared to everything else that has already been.
Speaking of favorite consoles, of course, you need to have some favorite games to go along with those consoles.
I think it has to boil down to the Smash Brothers series. Like, those games were always just something I really enjoyed playing. I remember back when I was a kid seeing the commercial for the original N64 one with them, skipping through the meadow and then they're just beating each other up. Because I knew at least, Mario and Donkey Kong. We didn't have that many games on my Super Nintendo, so that was the first time I was introduced to the Kirby series, Metroid, Legend of Zelda even. So seeing Smash Brothers and seeing that it was just like this supposed to be fun party beat 'em up, it looked like it was a lot of fun.
In terms of what makes them want to buy a game, Luke's response was about how a certain aspect of a game can make people do a lot more than simply buy a game.
Ever since I was younger, graphics were what pulled me into the video games. In fact, they're always what inspired me. I love the worlds that I was given by the game developers and such. In fact, I've just loved the graphics so much that that's the reason I'm here at Edinboro. I'm a computer animator, and I want to graduate from here and go into game development so that I can make the graphics that have influenced my life in so many ways.
Now would be a good time to mention that I, along with Aaron, Luke, and a couple other people featured here, are part of the Gamers Guild here on campus, a gathering of gamers to relax and play games together every Friday night. As such, I asked these two about their involvement with the gaming community.
My experiences with the gamers community has been all over the place, truly. I'd say it first started out with the Xbox community, where it was not favorable at all, very rude and not nice people. Then I decided to get into PC gaming, where I met a lot more intelligent and a lot more open-minded and friendly people who really had a huge impact on my life. And then I came here to Edinboro, and I decided to start hanging out with Gamers Guild, and they're just all really great people. People who've really just made my life for the better.
However, as I've alluded to before, video games can impact a person's life, and I asked them how games have
Video
impacted them.
games have impacted me, I think, as a person. Even though that they're just stories being told and they're not based off of real life experiences, there's still something that you see. It's inspiring to see, like, usually the underdog fighting against somebody who's so overpowering to them, which is really fit to me because I was never really as big or as popular. I was always the underdog in most situations that I was in, and it always helped me push forward even through these hard times. It was something that I could always go to.
Well, Aaron replied,
You kind of get in like a thing of that when it's multiplayer games, because if you lose a lot, then you're like, great, and that just puts you in a foul mood. And growing up as a kid, especially, like, some kids can like really get into it. But in a way, that's kind of helped me, like, just kind of cope with just having fun, like, like getting over the fact that, like, oh, I just lost, so it doesn't matter that I enjoyed myself, it's whatever. But like, it's kind of taught me that, like, if you just work at something, you can get better at it, but at the same time, if you just get the experience out of it, it's great.
At this time, we are probably in our late teens or early 20s. We know what consoles we like and what we don't like, what types of games we like, and we start to form cohesive opinions on why we choose to play the games that we play. Just as we are constantly growing, video games are always evolving. First, I asked the question of what type of games people prefer. I asked this to another friend of mine, Andy, who responded with this.
I like role-playing games. My first game that I really got into was Final Fantasy VII back when I was about 8 or 9 years old. And ever since then, I've been a huge Final Fantasy fan up until probably about 10 or 11. And then after that, they just kind of got boring to me.
While another friend of mine, Hollis, had a more open-ended answer.
Well, I'm really not that picky about my gaming tastes. If I had to pick a favorite genre, I like RPGs a lot. But I enjoy shooters, I enjoy action games, I enjoy puzzle games even. Like, really not that picky.
But both of them had great responses as to why they are gamers to this day and why.
It lets me relieve the stress from daily life routines, and it allows me to really immerse myself into another world where I'm not dealing with my own stresses, but I'm putting myself in somebody else's world where I like to fix their problems for them.
Hollis answered the question with this.
It's relaxing to be able to do something that's not possible, or to live a different life for a minute.
While they both have different ways of expressing why they choose to stay gamers, both Hollis and Andy shared a similar opinion about why video games are important today.
For one, it's developing a very big into a very big subset of our culture, and it's something that a lot of people do and enjoy, and is becoming how a lot of, especially younger people, are relating to their world. And in the same way film did, and books before it, and even mythological, it's another medium for artistic expression, and I really don't think there's ever a bad way to have one of those.
And they both said the same about the future of video games.
I think video games will remain to be a prime source media because it allows for communication between different players. It allows you to branch out and, meet people that you ordinarily wouldn't be able to meet. For example, I used to play World of Warcraft, and I actually was a leader of a guild, and a lot of my player base was actually from South Africa. And that was really interesting to me because the way we communicated was very different, and it allowed me to see a different viewpoint of how people actually game. I think that's going to be important for upcoming generations of gamers because it allows them to go what I've gone through and branch out and really see how different nationalities and other people take their video games.
You've only heard a few of the gamers at Edinboro and their different experiences with games, so imagine the hundreds, thousands, even millions of people who have even more unique gaming stories. I can't even imagine what this world would be like without all the consoles that have allowed many people to get away from the stress of the real world and to go into a world that made us never want to leave. They mean a lot to the people you've heard today. They mean so much to people all across the world. Video games, in my opinion, have changed the world for the better, and it looks like they're here to stay. As long as video games still exist, there will always be gamers.